Hello, welcome to Counterpoint Conversations. This is Shah, VP Research and co-founder at Counterpoint Research. Today we are going to discuss a very interesting topic. It's more of an elephant in the room when it comes to mobile and technology space. So everyone has heard about 5G Advanced and how 5G Advanced is rolling out right now. And 5G Advanced is one of the key steps towards building the AI-driven, autonomous, and efficient networks. And to discuss this, we welcome one of the world's leading AI network infrastructure vendors, Ericsson, to our Counterpoint Conversations to unpack the road ahead with this intent-driven network. So we have with us Airin Cherian, Head of Product Lifecycle 5G RAN Software, Deployments and Performance at Ericsson, to deep dive on these excitement technologies which are unfolding. So welcome, Airin, to the show.
Thank you, Neil. Great to be here.
Yeah, I know we have been discussing offline also quite a bit on how this evolution is happening. So one key question while writing some of these insights on the topic came to my mind is like, why 5G Advanced and how this cellular evolution is different from the previous generations?
Yeah, no, great questions to start with, of course, Neil. I mean, if we look at how the mobile industry has evolved over the last couple of decades, I'm sure you'll remember this time when CSPs used to charge for voice and SMS. But of course, at some point, voice and SMS became unlimited. But then CSPs were able to charge us for data. I mean, you would get 2 gigs a month, and if you needed more, you paid more. But of course, at some point, even data has become unlimited. And CSPs have been looking or exploring the next new currency, as some would call it, or new revenue streams. And that's where the Ericsson 5G Advanced will support the required ingredients to unlock a whole new set of differentiated services, thereby enabling new revenue streams for our CSPs. Now, that's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is, as you introduce new services, the operational complexity will also start to balloon. And it's therefore important that you simplify through automation. And I think what you will see is these 5G Advanced networks, they transition away from kind of the legacy way of manually tuning and optimizing features to more of a state where the operators can set a desired experience, what we call an intent. And the network will automatically tune itself to deliver that experience. So I would say those are two of the areas that 5G Advanced will address. One is, how do we solve the monetization paradigm, but also the operational complexity. And if I may just add one more quick point, we do expect 5G Advanced to broadly adopt AI in RAN technology as well, be it to extract more performance, be it to enable new services, or even to drive more automation.
That's brilliant. So yeah, AI is cutting across everything, and I think RAN is a great starting point. Obviously, it's easier to do on the core network side, where it's more software driven and compute driven, right? On the RAN, it's the most challenging part. So how are your discussions with CSPs right now? What is the initial traction among the global CSPs you're working with? You work with hundreds of CSPs, and how do you see the excitement about 5G Advanced?
No, and it's been really interesting to see how our CSPs are able to take some of these ingredients and convert them into, I would say, both new business models, but also new services. And we see traction on both. If you were to start with kind of the business model aspect, I'd probably refer you to the airline industry. As you know, you have kind of the economy class, the business class, the first class. And depending on which class of service, the moment you step into the airport, you feel a very different experience, be it a separate queue for check-in, to security, to boarding, of course, and on the flight as well. So even though we are all on the same aircraft going towards the same destination, there's a very, very different level of experience. And perhaps another similar analogy would be kind of the highways, where you have the express lane, you have the general lanes as well. And when there is congestion, you will experience a very, very different level of experience depending on which lane you're on. And that's kind of the business models that we see some of our customers, especially I would say Singtel in Singapore is introducing, where they're actually enabling their subscribers to subscribe to different tiers of user experience-based services. Meaning if there is congestion, a subscriber who's subscribed to, let's say, the first class service would get a much, much better experience compared to one that is not. And that's an extremely interesting business model. And hopefully more CSPs will kind of get onto that adoption wagon. The second aspect I would say would be traction with new services. And there are many new services that are getting traction. I'm sure you will read it in the news as well. But perhaps one that I would double click on would be the area of mission critical. And I think one example in this domain would be if you look at what T-Mobile US announced earlier this year, was the service called T-Priority, where, of course, it's your existing network assets, but they're able to offer a much higher level of service or differentiated, prioritized service to the New York City public safety personnel, therefore driving new revenue streams for them. So really excited to see some of this, both business models, but also services gaining traction with 5G Advanced.
It's brilliant. So to have these kind of experiences, obviously automation is super important and it has to be super dynamic and real time, right? In terms of providing this experience, prioritizing, segregating. And that is why you said AI is becoming important not only across the code, but at the radio side as well, in prioritizing the traffic and the use. So what are the different use cases you see coming out of these business models, right? What are different use cases you can, like you gave a couple of examples on like mission critical, as well as what are the other use cases and other capabilities which 5G Advanced unlocks? Maybe it's like we discussed before, it was like uplink, for example, right? So can you give some examples of those?
Yeah, if you look at, if you were to tie AI and uplink, those two actually go very well. And maybe I'll explain that a little more. If you look at some of the AI applications that are planned or some that are coming out, there are some both in the consumer space, but also in the industry space. And if you look at the consumer space, I'm sure you've been following, the Meta AI glasses. There are glasses out there that, of course, have a camera, on the glass itself. But they are working on taking all of that information, feeding it to their AI models, which would then provide you augmented information on your lens, like an augmented display. And it will get even more exciting when they come out with earbuds that have cameras. And these earbuds are not meant to take pictures. They're meant to scan, your environment. And they take all of this information, send it upstream to their AI models, and those models will proactively send you augmented information that will be displayed on your glasses. So you get like a 180-degree augmented feel. Really cool use case, of course. And we don't expect those to be too far out into the future. But I think for us as an industry, what we have to be cognizant of is what are the implications on the network when those services come out, especially the tax on the uplink, because all these camera feeds, they are going uplink, and therefore they consume a lot on the uplink capacity. And maybe a similar example that we also see gaining traction is the autonomous taxis. They're getting traction in certain parts of the world, and they have a very similar problem in the sense that they have a lot of cameras in these cars, and these cameras are actually shipping telemetry and information upstream. And we already have real-world experiences where we see these taxis creating significant uplink load on the networks. So some of these applications really, really cool, for us as consumers. But I think for the industry, it's important that the CSPs are cognizant of how do they prepare their networks, especially, as I said, linking that to uplink capacity.
Absolutely. Some of the use cases which we have seen also from talking with CSPs and what they have deployed and what they're seeing in terms of nature of traffic changing with AI coming in. As you said, talked about consumer AI, right? So we are seeing a lot of chat GPTs and a lot of uplink traffic in terms of prompts and tokens, right? And also downlink as well. So we're seeing some of the operators are seeing almost 300x increase in token traffic, right? So earlier video used to be like 60-70% of the overall network traffic, right? And now they're preempting like in next 3 to 4 years, 30% of the traffic will come from the tokens itself, right? And for that uplink two-way communication, I think it's super important networks are organized that way.
Absolutely. And imagine for a second, today, most of those chat GPT prompts are text. Imagine there come a time when those will be, like this camera scanning the environment. Imagine the burden that would add when you have multimodal prompts rather than, like a text prompt. So yes, I think the problem and the need for more capacity, of course, will continue to balloon thanks to some of these new AI applications.
Exactly. Another use case which was interesting, which I think you see, and a lot of business models we are seeing around it is uplink broadcasting, as well as stadium. In stadium where everyone is sitting and uploading a lot of videos and images to social media, right? And there also there's a chance where you can have those experience-based traffic business models, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I mean, if you look at stadiums, and it's quite interesting because in a typical network, the ratio between your downlink and uplink is 10:1, meaning 10 times downlink volume to 1 time uplink data volume. If you go to a stadium, interestingly, it shouldn't be a surprise because everybody's on their phone taking pictures rather than watching what's going on. The split is actually the reverse. I mean, we've seen 65% of the total traffic volume being uplink, rather than being downlink heavy. So absolutely. I mean, in stadiums, I think uplink is a huge constraint, and I think some of these differentiated services would be of tremendous value.
Great. So we talked about a lot of business models and new experiences-based charging. And what about economics of networks? How does AI and 5G advanced combination help with saving cost, OPEX? Is there something which CSPs should look forward to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think as I briefly mentioned initially, we do expect AI to get more broader adoption with our 5G advanced software. I would say in all aspects, performance, to services, to even automation and OPEX savings. But I think it's important to note that AI will be supported across all layers of the software stack. And if you were to just visualize this for just a second, I mean, we have the lower layers, L1, channel estimation type algorithms. You have the middle layers, L2, link adaptation type algorithms. And you have L3 or the upper layers, mobility type algorithms. And the reason why I'm saying this is because the lower down you go in the software stack, the more stringent are the timing requirements. Our link adaptation AI model will respond within 20 microseconds because that's how stringent the timing requirements are. And if you were to put that into perspective to say ChatGPT-like models, they take of the order of a few seconds. My point being, you need to have more leaner and optimized AI models for the radio access network, especially if you want to run them, at the far edge. And I think the good part, again, tied to kind of the OPEX conversation, is these models can actually be run on our existing, compute platforms. 1 million of those are all, deployed. And of course, we see that climbing. So the operators don't necessarily have to gain these benefits by having to invest in new, network infrastructure. And talking of benefits, I mean, this link adaptation capability that we have out there being tested with many of our CSPs, they're already seeing 15 to 20% improvement in performance over algorithms that have been optimized for decades. So tremendous potential without necessarily having to invest in new hardware, simply using, a software upgrade. And of course, the same level of potential would then be translated to the other areas as well. Like, for instance, new services. We are exploring new algorithms for some of our service capabilities, but then to your point, also in the domain of, automation.
Brilliant. So the third vector which I was thinking about is obviously 5G Advanced brings new connectivity capabilities like 5G Red Cap, positioning, right? Can you talk a little bit about how those also bring in new capabilities for operators?
Yeah, I think we certainly see a lot of traction these days with some of these other services besides, of course, those enabled through differentiated connectivity. We are, of course, as an industry, working on a number of new positioning related capabilities. I would say macro positioning, device agnostic positioning, and we see AI actually helping in this domain as well to predict, the device more accurately in terms of where the device is. So tremendous potential in that domain. But also, as you pointed out, reduced capability devices. And it kind of sounds counter when we talk of advanced technologies to be talking of something that's of reduced capability. But the point here really is these are more cost optimized chipsets, but that enable new and advanced use cases for our customers, therefore driving new revenue streams. And we are certainly seeing good traction with RedCap devices, especially at some of our leading CSPs. Again, going back to the point of enabling new revenue streams.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have been tracking the evolution of these IoT technologies as well. And we're seeing the overall cost of the chipsets and IoT modules have been going down. It used to be like $50 and now it has gone up to sub $30. And even with some vendors, chipset price is going down to even sub 20 by end of this year or start of next year. I think that will bring in a big wave of 5G RedCap devices. So a lot of these IoT devices which are on legacy 3G, 4G, which are less cost efficient network, less intelligent network, can move to 5G RedCap, right? So it's brilliant. We talked about all of these capabilities and the benefits it brings. But if you double click on this, or even not double click, if you go up and look at it, it's in the end, it's more about automation and simplification, right? Even though it sounds so complex with AI coming in, but it's about simplification, correct?
Absolutely. And I think, as we discussed, if you look at traditional networks, they are single purpose, meaning it's you and I sitting with a phone, connecting enhanced mobile broadband, as one would call it, right? But as we look at the introduction of new services, these networks are moving more and more into what we call multi-purpose networks, where you can actually introduce a number of different services. And with those, of course, comes, as you said, the operational complexity, especially if you need to scale these services. I mean, the complexity just exponentially would increase. And that is where, to your point, the need for simplification. So you cannot just simply focus on monetizing because you will not be able to scale it. And therefore, you need to complement this with your simplification as well. And that's where, as we briefly discussed, the transition that's happening, at least with our software, when it comes to manual tuning and manual optimization, where we move away to an area where the operator can configure a desired intent or a desired user experience. And the network will automatically tune itself in order to deliver, that desired experience. And the good part is this isn't some kind of a future vision, right? I mean, we actually have intent-driven features that are commercially deployed today in our customer networks, especially in the domain of saving energies, the domain of energy consumption, where the operator can set a desired user experience, and the system will automatically turn off certain carriers as long as it can meet the desired user experience, but also save energy consumption in the network for our consumers. And I think this will be an extremely interesting journey because we do believe the use of AI will be critical, especially as you have multiple conflicting intents in the system, but also the need for real-time observability, because how do you know if my intents are being satisfied? So there will be a need for kind of real-time, per second, per slice observability as well. And those are some of the exciting things that, is happening right now, at least in our shop. So certainly well on our way towards kind of the promise of, intent-driven autonomous networks.
Brilliant. So 5G was a very good foundation layer as we moved built away from the success of 4G, right? And it was a good stepping stone to something like 5G Advanced right now. 5G Advanced is also a stepping stone to future 6G networks, right? Which are being thought about by 3GPP and designed in a way which will serve and take this to the next level.
No, absolutely. I mean, we believe 5G Advanced will be a critical stepping stone towards 6G. We discussed a lot about AI. We will broadly use AI in our 5G Advanced software across, as I said, all the different layers of our stack. And this will be deployed by millions of nodes out there. So imagine the amount of learnings we would get, both as a vendor, but also as an industry, when these things are deployed at scale, not just from a technology standpoint, but also from a business standpoint, meaning how will our CSPs manage it, LCM, aspects of that nature. So I think there is a tremendous amount of learnings that we will get over the next 4 or 5 years. And of course, what better way to perfect your art than with real world experience, right? And I think that's why, at least I truly believe that these learnings will enable us to take yet another step function change in how kind of networks perform, but also operate when we get to 6G.
One final question from my end. How do you see the evolution in terms of timeline for 5G advanced adoption? Like we saw in some of the scenarios where some of the greenfield operators directly jumped from like 4G to 5G SA, right? Deploying 5G SA, like Geo, for example. So do you see some of the operators which are not advanced at this point could directly jump from like to 5G advanced, 5G SA and 5G advanced, and then have a good roadmap for 6G? How do you see because you work with so many different CSPs, all are in different journeys, right? So how do you align to their requirements and the timelines they have with their portfolio?
Yeah, no, I think that's of course a great question. Thankfully, we as Ericsson have an opportunity to work with all the different leading CSPs. As you mentioned, be it the big ones in the US, to Europe, to Asia, to Australia, and thankfully we get to work with and learn from some of these different experiences. And as you rightly pointed out, they're all very, very different in where they are in their journeys. You have some that are very, very forward-leaning, constantly exploring, new ideas, new capabilities. But of course, there are others who are waiting and watching. And I think there are some lessons that we have learned, I would say, with our journey so far. If I were to just touch upon a couple of lessons, number one, there will be no silver bullet to success. You have to experiment and try out multiple services if you want to succeed. And that's what we are seeing with some of our leading customers, be it, fixed wireless to mission critical to events, to new reduced capability chipsets. Those are the ones that are finding success. And the second lesson is, if something works in one part of the world, it doesn't necessarily translate to success elsewhere. A case in point would be fixed wireless access. I mean, I would say it's been fairly successful in the US, broadly applicable, but you cannot translate the same level of success to a country like Japan, for instance, where they have fiber into the rural areas as well. Point being, operators have to experiment to see what works in their market. And the ones that are leading this journey are the ones that are forward-leaning and willing to experiment to see what works for them. At least our guidance to our CSPs would be, you have to jump in. You have to experiment to see what works for you, rather than wait and watch to see, hey, is there a silver bullet? Is there a app that would succeed? And that, I don't think, is the right strategy. So yes, we have the technology adoption curve, as we would do for any new technology. You have the leaders. We see fairly good traction now with standalone SA. It took a while, but we see that ramping up. And of course, 5G Advanced is also in its early days from a technology adoption curve. But it's great to see some of the leaders setting the way, or paving the way, if you may, to show what success would look like. And hopefully, some of our other customers will jump on as well.
That's brilliant rundown, Airin, on where we are at in this 5G Advanced journey and what it brings to the table. Fantastic conversation, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Neil. Great conversations.